right, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. We are here to introduce streaming quadratic funding to the world. My name is Graven. I am one of the co-founders at the GeoWeb. With me here is VJ from Superfluid.
Yep, head of product to Superfluid.
And want to give a shout out to our friends and collaborators at Gitcoin Allo and Gitcoin Passport. They're not up on stage, but they were integral to making this project come to life. So before we get into streaming quadratic funding, we're just going to do a quick refresher on what quadratic funding is, if you're not familiar. It is a mechanism that is used to democratically and effectively allocate a matching pool. And so in quadratic funding, your dollars are votes. If you care about something a lot, you can donate a lot of money to it. But instead of just having a direct linear relationship between the amount of funding that you donate and your power of the matching pool, quadratic funding introduces a really cool concept in which is that how many people are supporting that grant with you. That's a super important signal for how much of the matching pool you should get. And so it's a dynamic matching mechanism. And so in this simple example we have up here, the same amount of dollars are being donated to a grant, but the grant that is getting smaller donations, but with 10x the number of people supporting it, are going to end up with 10x the number of votes or matching. And so why would we want to do that? It took me a while to even explain what was going on there. Why did we go through all that trouble? Well, quadratic funding was introduced by Vitalik Buterin, Zoe Hitzig, and Glenn Weil, and they did a bunch of fancy math and basically proved that this is a near optimal way to fund public goods. And we won't get into the math of how that works, but we can actually just rely on our intuition on why this mechanism works. Gitcoin grants, if you're familiar, if you've been around Web3 for a while, they use quadratic funding for all of their, not all of their grants programs, but their main grant program. And they've raised over $56 million for public goods with that, for both crypto and non-crypto public goods. And if you've been on Gitcoin or not, you can visit a grantee page and you can end up seeing, if I donate $1, I'm going to get 100x or more in matching if it's a popular grant. And when you see that, it's like a superpower. It draws you in and you're going to donate, right? You feel that pull. And you don't just give out the 100x matching to just any grant. It's the grants that have been supported by the most people. And so it ends up with this feedback loop where you can overcome one of the most tricky things in public goods, and that's the free rider problem. And so all that math, all that thing, when you see a big number, you're going to donate, and you end up getting more efficient decision making. But how quadratic funding rounds have been run to date come with some downsides. If we think about that mechanism, what's actually happening, you have to aggregate all the votes together, do a computation, and then you're going to release the funds. So it happens in these batches, in these rounds. And typically in crypto so far, they're, say, 2 weeks long. And this means that as a donor, you have 2 weeks to go log in, sift through potentially hundreds of grants and make decisions about which ones are worthy of your support. There's lots of them. It's really hard. It's asking a lot of donors to make that many decisions. On the grantee side, as a public good, this might be your whole budget for the quarter. And so in this 2-week period, basically you're going to drop everything and you're going to focus on marketing. But so is everyone else. So it creates this dynamic where everyone's competing for attention that's inherently limited, and you end up losing track of what you're actually building. You lose momentum. And the other part is just structurally, it creates pressure to centralize discovery of these grants. You have limited time. You're going to log into a single website. It's going to present you the grants, and the order in which you see them could affect who you're going to donate to. Are you really going to make it to grant 500 and give them as much attention as you did the first one? It really becomes a really challenging dynamic. And so this batch processing and this setup just creates a lot of rigidity, and we start to lose some of that theoretical efficiency that quadratic funding offers and what gets people so excited about it. But it doesn't have to be this way. quadratic funding is a very versatile idea. And so this is where streaming quadratic funding comes in. We're going to do away with that batch processing, and we're going to embrace the full programmable nature of money that we have on Ethereum. And we're going to implement quadratic funding with streams. It's a little blurry up there, but you can see some money flowing on a UI. We'll get into what is actually happening there. So what is streaming quadratic funding? It is an implementation of quadratic funding that is funded and distributed in real time. Instead of collecting all those votes, batching them together, and sending out big piles of money after some period, we're going to shift the model to having a matching pool that is streamed out every single second. And the allocation of that matching stream is going to be determined by who is voting at this exact second. And so those votes can change over time and adjust, and so will the matching streams. Effectively, what this ends up creating is a series of micro quadratic funding rounds run each second, funded and distributed each second. And it really changes the whole dynamic of quadratic funding rounds. It's not just faster. It is faster, but the continuous nature just really changes the dynamics across the board, and it becomes something totally different. And so there's a whole bunch of benefits. We'll cover a few here. The first one that is really about embracing informational advantages and changes over time. And so with streaming quadratic funding, with a quadratic funding round every single second, new information comes in, you can adjust and make a better decision. You can add grantees, you can remove grantees, you can increase the matching pool, you can change your mind about what you are supporting. You don't have to wait until next quarter or next year or next half year to change your decision about what public goods you want to support. Up next is decentralization. I talked about that pressure to consolidate all the activities that are required for a successful quadratic funding round. Because streaming quadratic funding can be ongoing, it can be open-ended, or at least way longer than 2 weeks, we can start to push the discovery and the decision-making to the edges. Instead of a centralized UI, we could have something like this. Right next to the follow button on GitHub or Twitter or wherever, there could be a button to donate to your favorite public good through a streaming quadratic funding round. But instead of just a simple donate, buy me coffee button, you're still going to get that extra jolt of support through the matching pool. Next, as we relieve this pressure on decision making, we're going to end up with higher conviction support systems between donors and grantees. It's like a supercharged Patreon. You're going to open your streams, they can be open-ended, and the builders are going to be able to focus on delivering their vision rather than marketing and worrying about where their next paycheck is going to come from. They'll have instant access and be able to just focus on making the maximum impact. And last but not least, what I'm most excited about and what we see a lot in Web3 is composability. Money is information, and streaming quadratic funding processes that money and information in real time. So it makes a great thing to plug into other mechanisms. You can even start stacking streaming quadratic funding rounds to embrace localized decision making and make it more a bite-sized problem in your allocation challenges. So how does this thing actually work? What did we actually build here? We'll just go through a quick little overview. We'll start with, just say this round is already running. There's a matching pool. We are streaming it to 3 grantees here through a tool that Superfluid built that VJ is going to get to in a little bit here, called a streaming distribution pool. A new donor comes. They decide they want to support the developer up top here. They're going to call what's referred to as a strategy, an Allo protocol. Allo protocol is a new tool that Gitcoin developed to help do exactly this. Allow people to come up with new and interesting ways to allocate funds towards the things that they care about. And so we built a streaming quadratic funding strategy. You're going to call it. your money is going to go through to the donor, to the grantee, just like you would expect, but it's going to do a secondary thing. And it's going to check to see your on-chain Gitcoin passport score. It's basically just a trust score. Are you a Sybil? Are you trying to subvert the mechanism? And if you have a high enough score, we're going to go ahead and update the allocation with that quadratic matching formula in that streaming distribution pool that Superfluid has built. So this is all in one transaction, and what happens is magically all 3 of the grantees in this round are going to have updated matching streams. It's the coolest thing I've seen in blockchain right now. It feels like magic, and I'm just going to pass it over to VJ here for a little bit to talk more about what these streaming distribution pools are.
Thanks, Graven. So you might be asking yourself, how is it possible that we can achieve this UX benefit of basically the UX of donations, monthly subscriptions, yet all of the power of quadratic funding in the back end? And the answer is Superfluid distribution pools. Superfluid has been built in a modular way where we've been able to add functionality over time. This is the latest and greatest piece of our puzzle, something we've been working on for a while. But you can think of it fundamentally as a scalable way of doing indexed-based streaming payments. And streaming really here you can think of as recurring if there is not already an idea of that in your mind. The most powerful part of this is that you can update all of the streams that are coming out of one pool with one single transaction, which basically means that it is hugely scalable to as many inputs and outputs as you want. All of the outgoing streams will update from a single transaction. And there are a number of other benefits you can tap into besides that. So actually, under the hood, all of the units, the sort of individual percentages of allocation are actually transferable ERC20 units. So if you're a builder, you can imagine some of the things that would give you in terms of capabilities. And optionally, you can make it, and this is something we take use of here, is that you can make it that any sender can actually pay into a Superfluid distribution pool and have the proceeds split equally to all senders and update via the same mechanism. So this is actually live and available today. If you're a builder interested in sort of finding out more about how you can use this, please go and check out our docs. There's a QR code below if you can scan it, but otherwise you should find distribution pools there. Really encourage you to go and check it out. It is hopefully a kind of well of creativity. And I think what Graven was alluding to earlier is also really important. Like, this isn't just an isolated thing. Like, it isn't that streaming quadratic funding sits by itself in this kind of ecosystem of kind of composable money as one kind of app that you can use end to end. Like, this actually fits into the bigger Superfluid model of basically composability of money. And the idea here is that actually almost any type of kind of on-chain recurring payment can be modeled as a Superfluid stream. And when you do so, then you can essentially chain them together, and you can kind of have salaries, vesting, rewards paying out to contributors, and those contributors paying into various types of Superfluid-enabled apps, like the kind of matching pool of the kind of streaming quadratic funding, or even things like DCA investments or subscriptions for content. And these revenue streams loop back around to the DAOs and Web3 businesses that provide them, sort of create this flowing economy where the velocity of money is almost infinity, which is incredibly powerful. And we have a number of other sort of benefits besides. We have basically the concept of hooks at the Superfluid protocol level, which basically enable these kind of apps like streaming quadratic funding or streaming exchanges and a lot of other stuff that I'm excited to announce and talk about very soon. But in this model, you can imagine, in a very practical sense, Optimism grantees for RPGF3 today are receiving their streams of rewards in OP tokens, and they could, for example, stream those rewards directly to the contributors of the projects, and those contributors could stream them into a matching pool, and you could basically have this full circle of streams composing, infinite number of levels deep in real time, which is something that we think is incredibly powerful. And we're actually going to see some live examples of this popping up over the coming weeks and months, which I'm excited to share more about. But if you want to learn anything more about Superfluid and building on Superfluid, particularly if you're hacking this week, feel free to reach out to me or check out our docs. They really explain all of this in more detail.
Okay, and so why I'm up here, I work on a project called the GeoWeb. I mentioned that earlier, but we are the first users of streaming quadratic funding. We launched our pilot just last week on Wednesday, the 21st, I believe, and couldn't be more excited to share it and see what happens with this experiment. Need to give a shout out to Public Nouns, one of the forks of Nouns DAO, but focused on supporting public goods experiments like this. They gave us 5 ETH for the matching pool. But also, this matching pool is, and really the genesis of why we wanted to build this is the GeoWeb is using Superfluid on the revenue generation side of our project. I gave a talk last year about Harburger taxes and partial common ownership. We use that and to manage a digital land market, and it produces revenue. And it's been producing revenue for about a year. But until streaming quadratic funding, we would get those funds, they would pool up, and then we'd like release them in batch. And that just didn't feel right. We always wanted to keep pushing towards this idea of composable mechanisms and getting this funding out into the world so it can make an impact. We're a small public goods project. The only way we're going to be able to compete is by being more nimble, and making better decisions. So that's what streaming quadratic funding does for us. It's basically our governance protocol now on the GeoWeb. So you can log on to geoweb.land/governance and help us make these decisions about where the funding goes. And yeah, so we're going to run this experiment for about 2 months. It could have been open-ended, but this is the first one. We did a small trusted group of grantees, just 6, to see how it goes, but we are very excited about where to go next. It's not all rainbows and unicorns. There are challenges, and a lot of them are similar to what you see in traditional quadratic funding rounds. Sybil attacks and collusion can really undermine the mechanism. Instead of donating $10 from one wallet, wouldn't it be better if I just split that across 10 wallets? Same thing happens with streaming quadratic funding, but there are a few differences. The payout function on streaming quadratic funding is going to be incremental rather than these big batches. So that kind of changes the game a little bit in the Sybil attack space. We also have the challenge of these donation streams are potentially open-ended. We can't just have one check of your Sybil score or what your trust score is up front, because things will keep evolving. And then finally, Vijay mentioned the near infinite power of streams and the capital efficiency. An attacker could open up a donation stream, quote unquote, to a grantee and loop it back to themselves and really inflate what they're actually donating and keep like a net actual outflow of 0. They'd have to do some hops in between, but these are really interesting problems. If you are into this sort of thing, this is just constant red team, blue team sort of thing. Gitcoin has been leading the way on that front for a long time, but streaming quadratic funding is going to put out some new challenges to nerd snipe you, and hopefully you can join us. On the offensive side, it's not all defense. We do have some exciting things on the roadmap that we're looking forward to next with streaming quadratic funding. We started with streaming quadratic funding, but there is another version of this that is pure votes based. And it might actually be less complex in a lot of ways. You don't have to deal with those loops. We'd keep the same streaming payout mechanism, but the mechanism for voting would be like a commitment that isn't like an active flow of money. And so you wouldn't have those same loops. Obviously, we're looking forward to scaling this to more donations, more grantees, see how all those things go. And then, like everything else in crypto, yeah, UX has a ways to go. We're at the bleeding edge of this tech. We didn't implement account abstraction or batching transactions. We haven't gotten to those decentralized donation mechanisms that I talked about earlier. We did build a centralized UI for now, but yeah, lots of exciting stuff there. And yeah, the water's warm, so hopefully come and join us. And so we'll wrap up with a call to action for this. This big QR code is that link that I gave earlier, geoweb.land/governance. We need you to participate in this. We need to see what happens as we stress test this. More donations, more data. We got to figure out what happens in the pilot. Also, I legitimately think streaming quadratic funding is the coolest thing you can do on a blockchain right now, like full stop. But not that many people know about it. Not that many people are here to learn about it. So we need you to go out and tell people about this and participate in it. This is only going to work if the meme replicates and helps get this out into the world. We've gotten great feedback initially as we did our Twitter launch this week. A lot of people reaching out to ask to run their own rounds, hopefully to help us build. We are definitely open for that. This is all open source. We want to see this across the industry. So definitely, I guess first, go donate, interact, learn, help us get some more eyeballs on this, and then hit us up, and we would love to build with you and see where streaming quadratic funding can go. I guess we have a few minutes for Q&A if we want. I don't know, there's no mics out there, or it might be kind of awkward, but if anyone wants to shoot up a hand, has questions, we'll do that. If not, all right, y'all. Thank you for being here. Good luck with the rest of Biddle Week, and hope to see you on the internet.
Thanks, everyone. Don't forget to go donate.